Senator Kerrey, thank you so much for joining me today. As you know, the family, friends, and fellow soldiers of Blake Kelly, who died in Bosnia in 2003 while in service as a peacekeeper with the Nebraska Army National Guard, will be seeing this. So before you and I have a conversation, I'd like to offer you the opportunity to talk directly to Blake Kelly's loved ones.
Well, I mean, to the family of Blake Kelly and to his friends and those that served with him, we do remember. And I'm so grateful to the Rotarians for making the effort to remember, because among the real challenges for men and women who put their lives at risk and oftentimes give their lives is they wonder whether or not they're going to be appreciated, whether or not people will remember, make the effort, which is to remember requires effort. And so to the family and to his friends and to those who served with them, at least today, we remember. And we may be negligent for 365 days a year, but right now, we're remembering Blake Kelly and what he gave to the cause of peace and freedom. And I really am very grateful for the Rotarians for making this a special event, because it's just so easy in life to forget, to move on, to to not acknowledge, especially with an all-volunteer force, that a relatively small fraction of us are paying the price.
So our Rotary motto is service above self. And it seems to me that you have lived that motto, that Rotarians embrace service above self. So I'd like to know, to what do you attribute your path in life towards that service above self?
Well, I guess first of all, I would never present myself as somebody who hasn't been unselfish from time to time. I mean, it's impossible, at least for me, to maintain the standard that you're suggesting. And I have to attribute it to whatever I've got that's good to my parents and my family and friends who, we tend to self-select people who have the same values as we do. And I grew up in Lincoln, and I'm grateful for that.
You've said that a hero is someone who over and over does the right thing, even though no one is there to witness it. And I wonder who some of those unsung heroes are that have crossed paths with you.
Well, first of all, they're in your audience. My suspicions are that this event is not going to be covered by the press. It may not likely make it into the news. Nobody may be aware of what you're doing today. I mean, on my list, it's my mom and dad. I mean, they were completely unselfish, sacrificed an enormous amount, and did so with no complaint. But there's a long list of others. I spent, after getting wounded in Vietnam, I spent 9 months at the Philadelphia Naval Hospital. And the nurses were important, the doctors were important, all the people that took care of me were important. But the most moving ones were people who came on a volunteer basis. They came in and just said, it's going to be okay, or took us out on boat rides and took us into their homes and tried to make us feel like, we were going to be able to heal. And none of those individuals were recognized. My guess is nobody paid any attention to them other than those who were being helped and, feeling good as a consequence. I mean, you think of all the volunteers that out there little league softball, dealing with angry parents and all the volunteer efforts that goes on in our society. It's essential, and we get in great debates about how far the government should go and how important the private sector. But in between those two entities are volunteers, and it's a really powerful thing that Americans do.
And today we have, of course, a completely volunteer military service versus when you served and the draft was in effect. How does that change? So that's probably not a fair question because so many things are different because of that.
Yeah.
What are the most important things? What are the biggest things that are different between those times and today?
Well, I mean, everybody was involved. I mean, it was, yes, you could get deferments and so forth, but when the notice arrived, in my case, I was practicing pharmacy up in Sioux City, Iowa, and I was um, told to go down to Omaha and register, and not register, but take a physical. And when I came back, that I was found to be fit. I knew I was going to get a letter from the Army or somebody telling me it was time for me to serve. So yeah, and we all got it. We all got those letters. That was before the lottery and other sorts of things that tried to select a smaller number of people, but everybody felt like they were a part of it, for good and bad. It wasn't all, wasn't all perfect, but you felt like you were doing the same thing that, some other person had done. I mean, one of the first people in my cohort that found themselves in Vietnam was one of my best friends in high school. Didn't go to college, and many of the men in my platoon were high school graduates. And they were, the Harvard graduates and high school graduates serving side by side.
Today, there's probably less diversity because it's a volunteer army, a volunteer military, and we tend to draw from the same or larger pools from certain sectors of the United States, geographically at least. But there are women serving in combat. There are a lot of there's diversity in other ways. I don't know if you think that diversity is going far enough. If there are more things that we should be doing to attract people into military service.
Well, I mean, the diversity still doesn't have the military lowering their standards for the most part. I mean, I'm not sure. I was in SEAL team. I'm relatively confident I couldn't get in SEAL team today. So the quality of the force is superior, vastly superior. And they're committed. And among the things that you hear talked about today that I think is really important when you think about the military is a thing called culture. The culture of New York City is different where I live now. Is different than the culture of Lincoln or Omaha or Holdridge or whatever. The culture in the military is different than the culture of the civilian population. And you really, I can still feel that culture. You understand you've got the Uniform Code of Military Justice. You understand you've got a chain of command. You understand that if you get orders to leave from San Diego and report to the Philippines, you go to the Philippines. And if you've got 3 kids in the school system and you got to pick them up and move them, you pick them up and move them. So the culture is different, and I think it's important for civilians to remember that, because there's a lot less freedom. There's a lot less range of motion that you have as a individual, as a man or woman in the forces. But to the primary point, I think you're asking, which is, yes, there's women serving in combat. We have more diversity, but we really have a superior fighting force today in the Army, Air Force, Navy, Marine Corps, Coast Guard, Reserve, National Guard. I mean, the training and the capacity to complete a mission is much better, I think, today than it was back in 1966 when I went in.
Today, as we honor and thank Blake Kelly for giving his life in service, I wonder how well you think we're doing as a country in taking care of our veterans, their families, their caregivers when they return from service. And the injuries today, more attention to traumatic brain injury and PTSD. How well are we doing, and what more could we be doing?
Well, I think we're doing well. I just think we can it's important to constantly ask yourself and answer that question, because I'm not sure you ever get to a point where you're doing enough. And if you take Blake Kelly, what you've got is one individual. I didn't know him. He wasn't somebody that I served with, obviously much younger than I am. But as I prepared for this conversation, I tried to understand who he was. I tried to picture him as a human being, because that's the loss that you have to feel in order to be able to, to vote and support the changes necessary to provide care. So I think we're doing a good job, but I guess I'm relatively confident that we can always do better.
And I wonder if there are any differences in a more rural state like Nebraska versus a state that has more urban population centers than we would have, and whether those unique needs of veterans in Nebraska, or whether there are unique needs for veterans in Nebraska versus, again, a more urban area, and how we ensure that those veterans who are probably farther away from formal veterans service centers and healthcare, if you think about that.
Oh, it's a big problem. It's a problem, to provide a full range of care, particularly testing. And all of us, as we get older, we need to get colonoscopy and make sure our PSA levels aren't going up. There's all sorts of things we have to do. And if you don't get that test, oftentimes, whatever disease you've got, particularly cancer, it's too late to treat you. So, yeah, I think it's a really important problem. It provokes in me the need to point out that among the really good things that are going on in Nebraska is that the University of Nebraska Medical Center works very closely with the Veterans Hospital System to reach out to rural communities and provide as much really high quality care as possible, because everything is specializing in medicine. So if I need neurosurgery, and first of all, if I needed neurosurgery in 1965, there weren't very many of them around, and now there are. And we have the capacity to cure diseases and solve problems that we couldn't do before. But and lots of times it's necessary to have the kind of partnerships we build up. I think the CARES Act, which allowed the VA to deliver services through the private sector, is a really smart way of doing it. The VA hospital in Omaha is a great example. You've got a not-for-profit sit alongside of it for the new outpatient clinic, funded again by unselfish Nebraskans that put up a ton of money to build that facility. So it's a way that outpatient facility, you can see Nebraskans responding, trying to figure out how to do what we need to do, which is never forget and try to provide the best care possible. If you talk to somebody who's served at Offutt, they'll tell you they've never had better treatment from a community in their lives. Many of them come back to either live in Sarpy or Douglas County or other places in Nebraska because they felt welcomed here. They felt at home here. They felt that we took care of them. So I think it's really important to just, as the Rotarians here are trying to do today, to remember one person. You remember that one person who is no longer with us, who sacrificed, and you put you in the right mood to do the right thing.
When we think about the contrast for veterans who came home during the Vietnam and Korean wars versus what I think our country has done a better job with in veterans who returned from Afghanistan and Iraq, it seems like we learned a hard lesson about the importance of a homecoming, to recognize an individual, to recognize a whole group. How important is this idea of a proper homecoming for service members, whether that's in words or deeds and actions?
Well, I think it's important, but I just, all of us are busy. I served, and I'm grateful for people who are serving, but there's an understandable tendency just to forget. You've got other problems that you're trying to solve, and you just get disconnected. But that's why I think it's really important what the Rotarians are doing today to recognize, as I said, one person, Blake Kelly, and it puts you in the right mood. It makes it easier for you to answer the question, what should you do? And I should point out, I'm under federal law, I'm eligible for care under the Veterans Administration, and all my records are in Omaha, Nebraska, and I go back once a year, and I get good care. I wear a prosthetic, and that's been provided me, and I have my list of complaints, and like everybody else does, but I still feel like I have a debt to my country. My country has given me, it seems to me, at least, a lot more than I've given it.
Here's another quote from you. Unexpected kindness is the most powerful, least costly, and most underrated agent of human change. Kindness that catches us by surprise, brings out the best in our natures. We're divided around so many things today. So I just had to talk about that for a moment in the final few minutes that we have together. We're divided around so many things today. It seems like we're entrenched ever deeper in political opposition, seemingly hesitant to meet in the middle on things. And I just wonder, when I think about your quote, and when you revisit that quote about kindness and unexpected kindness, how do we put that into practice? That unexpected kindness, when again, we're seemingly polar opposites on so many things today.
Well, I just think you have to practice it. And recognize that it's not only powerful to receive it, it's powerful to give it. to be sympathetic to somebody that you oppose politically. It may not get you to compromise on abortion or all sorts of other issues that are controversial. But if you can be sympathetic to another human being and what they're going through, it increases the chances. And I think there's a lot more sympathy and kindness and willing to give than oftentimes the mainstream media pays attention to. This is a good example. The Rotarians aren't celebrating the life of Blake Kelly because they lack sympathy. It's quite the opposite. They're forcing themselves to generate the sympathy necessary to be whole. I mean, so I think there's plenty of evidence around that we have lots of kindness, that it works. It's a good thing, again, both for the person who's delivering it and the person who's receiving it, to not be discouraged that we have an inadequate supply of it.
And finally, I just wonder what gives you hope. We all go through those periods where we think about the situation in Ukraine. We think about things in our own personal lives that maybe cause us to have that feeling of despair instead of hope. And I wonder, in your life, what has given you hope in the past, and what gives you hope tonight when you lie down to sleep?
Well, I may not have hope when I go down to sleep. I don't know, but look, I think there's two things. One is I completely reject those on the left and the right that describe America as on the verge of collapse, as a great catastrophe. The catastrophism that's presented by oftentimes both the left and the right, it's just wrong. Things are better in America than they've ever been before, whether it's health or education. It doesn't matter where you look. Things are better than they used to be. And you hear this, oh, the Chinese are beating us, but there's no line of people waiting to get into China. We have 1.3 million people from throughout the world that are coming into the United States, every single year legally. So what gives me hope is that fact. And also, secondly, you look at the younger generation, and they've got good values. They're trying to figure the world out. I don't understand them. I get confused about gender issues and so forth, but that's just because I'm an old fart, and I'm, and that happens. And third, I'd say add a third. Among the things that we older people have to be careful of, and be more accurate, we old people have to be careful of, is not to become a cynic and deliver that cynicism to young people. Be skeptical, doubting and requiring evidence, and somebody makes a claim, but the cynic believes that a human being is incapable of doing good. And oftentimes, the older we get, the more cynical more tempted we are to become cynics, and young people are encouraged to do the same. So, I think there's far more trust than we acknowledge. I think trust is the key to keeping our country healthy and vibrant and moving forward. And, there's plenty of evidence that Americans don't trust their government. They don't trust their Congress. They don't trust the church. They don't trust almost anything. And they don't, because they've become cynics, in part because, particularly in social media, they're being encouraged not to. So I try to avoid crossing the line from being a skeptic to a cynic, because I think it's lethal.
Probably some good advice for all of us. Thank you so much.
Okay.
Senator Kerrey, it's really been a pleasure speaking with you today. And on behalf of everyone at Lincoln Rotary 14, thank you for your service and for your
You're
time
welcome.
today.
You're welcome. Thank you.